ACC championship game, Florida State struggled with Louisville. They only won 16-6. So do you believe, let's say Florida State blew out Louisville in the ACC championship game. Do you believe that would have changed the committee and would have forced them to put Florida State into the college football playoff?
I think so, because if you look at overall Florida's schedule, they beat two big SEC teams. Now, albeit they beat Florida just last week in a pretty kind of limping way. They only beat them 24-15. But whenever you go down to the Swamp in Florida, that's a hostile territory to have to play in. And of course, they dominated at the time number 5 LSU 45-24 to start out their season. And then they went through the ACC with no problem. So I think you're right. I think had they probably been a little bit more dominant to show that it is a complete team, that offensively they can still make it work even with a third string quarterback. Defensively, they could even get takeaways and score on defense. If they could have done that all collectively, they would have probably made the committee think a little bit harder about what their decision was going to be. Because I kind of see why they put Alabama in. Again, I'm probably with everybody else, don't necessarily agree with it. Not the biggest fan, but I get why they did it, unfortunately.
Yeah, for sure. And I was actually going, that's where I was going with it next. I heard Stephen A. bring up TCU last year, and we saw TCU get blown off the field last year by Georgia. Do you feel like the committee felt that would happen this year in the college football playoff? Like Florida State would have gotten blown out had they made the playoffs?
I don't think so, because they would have had to face Washington. And Washington is one of those teams. They've been really good. Washington has proven themselves. They beat Oregon. They ran through the Pac-12 with basically no issue. What would be interesting, though, is would Florida State offensively be able to kind of counter it? Because Florida State right now, without Jordan Travis at quarterback, or even honestly their backup, Tate Rodemaker, who didn't do great at Florida when they played, but didn't do terrible, but he just wasn't turning heads by no means. It would kind of remind me of what Iowa as a team has been this year. They have an elite defense that's one of the best in the country, but offensively they just can't move the ball. So I think they would have worried, because they would have had to more than likely go against Washington as the 3 seed, and then you would have had honestly a fantastic matchup with Texas versus Michigan at the 1-4 spot potentially, which I would have loved to see that matchup.
What would be your response to that, Tony? That response to Florida State's head coach Mike Norvell's comments?
Oh no, I mean I agree wholeheartedly, because if you look at everything as a whole, Florida State did literally everything in their power that they could do as far as checking off every single box.
Yeah.
The biggest thing is go out there, make sure you win your games. If you lose a game, you lose control over whether or not you are going to be able to get into the playoffs or not, or you have to hope somebody else loses. So you lose all control over your situation. They went undefeated through their own conference, through outside of their conference. They beat everybody on their schedule. They did everything right that they were supposed to do. I mean, really, to him, what more can you do? You're in a Power 5 conference. You won the conference championship, albeit not in the, quote unquote, sexiest way you could win it, but you won nonetheless. It's like, what really more can you do at that point? You put in a team that you put in the SEC champion that lost to the Big 12 champion, and the Big 12 champion lost to an Oklahoma team that's now only, I believe, in the top 20s. They're not even, as high as they were when they first beat Texas. So it is disappointing, and I don't blame him. It's, to me, I also kind of look at it, and a lot of people have probably said this, I do think there is a little bit of an SEC bias because of not only how they looked at Florida State potentially being another TCU situation of getting destroyed in the playoffs. I think they looked at historically, what has the SEC brought whenever they've gone into the playoffs? You have Georgia, the last, back-to-back national champions, absolutely ran the table. Alabama's won multiple national titles in the CFP format. LSU won it not too long ago. So all of these SEC teams have had just dominance the last 10, 15 years. So to me, I think that also played a little bit of a factor. It's just, who does the CFP want in more that's going to, potentially draw more ratings, probably make bigger impact as far as football goes. A very talented Florida State team with essentially no quarterback, or a Alabama team that has been on an absolute hot roll since that loss to Texas.